Today I'm going to be transforming this image into this image in Adobe Photoshop. So here's my image. I'm just going to zoom in, zoom out, Control plus, Control minus. You can see it is pretty damaged, and I'll be honest with you, I actually damaged this photograph deliberately. I couldn't find any decent examples to use, so I decided to download a pretty decent photograph, and I've put all these marks on it so that I can work on it today to show you how I'd approach this particular image. Now there's two things I'm going to do with this image. I'm going to clean it up, get rid of all of the blemishes. I'm going to color correct it in the sense of getting the contrast right, and then afterward I'm actually going to hand tint the image. So I'm going to bring color in where there currently isn't. Let's start by actually looking at the image to see what we're up against. I think it's very important before you really dive in to spend just a little bit of time looking at the image to see what it's made out of, see what it's all about, so that we can approach it in the best way. Because if you don't, you end up misunderstanding the image and extra limbs occur and things like that. So let's spend a bit of time looking at the image. Done. Right, okay. Let's make a start. First things first, I think I need to crop this image. It's on a bit of a slant, as you can see, and there's lots of dead area around the edges of the image where it's all bleached out. So I'm going to use the crop tool over here, and I'm just going to start in this corner here. I'm just going to click and drag. I could just use the existing crop that's appeared around it, but hey ho, I'm going to go with that. And then I'm going to drag this pivot point here to this top corner, because that's the corner which I've already fixed, because that's where I started. And then I'm just going to click and drag outside of the crop just to get it like that. I'm actually holding down the Control key or the Command key on the Mac so I can finely rotate the crop. There we go. Just going to bring that out a little bit there. Push that up a tiny bit. The art of this really is trying to keep as much of the canvas in there, the original canvas, in the image as you can. So that's looking pretty good. I'm just going to commit to it. I could press enter or cancel, escape, but I'm just going to press enter. There we go. There is our cropped image. Okay, just going back to the history, just to have a look at the before and the after. You can see I've actually done a lot to this image, damaging it. But you can see that it is now rotated nicely, and a lot of the white has now disappeared. Great. The next thing I'd like to do to this image is remove all color. You see, although you would describe this image as a black and white, it is kind of sepia. And if you look at the top of the image here on the tab, you can see that it's an RGB image. It's a red, green, and blue channel based image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to normalize it by removing all color. And I'm going to use a very crude method to do this. So bear with me. Control U to bring up hue and saturation. That's Control U for uniform to bring up hue and saturation. And I'm just going to knock all of the saturation out of it. I wouldn't normally use that method for converting something into black and white, but because we're restoring this old image, I just want to push out as much coloring and staining as possible. So the image is now, as you can see, a grayscale image. It is still an RGB color space. If your image that you're working with does say gray up here, then it is a grayscale, a true grayscale. If you want to convert it for using to hand tint it later, then you will need to go to Image, Mode, and convert it from a grayscale to an RGB just by clicking on RGB color. Okay, so we're all set to go. That's great. Right, next, this is a very important stage. We need to sharpen the image. So I'm going to add a little bit of unsharp mask. Don't be put off by the name. It's one of the best filters in the filter drop down. And we're going to use unsharp mask to bring that sharpness, that crispness back to the image. Because if I zoom in, you can see that it's looking a little bit waxy. There's not much in the way of sharp, crisp detail. So unsharp mask, I'm going to do this as a smart filter. So I'm going to go to Filter, Convert for Smart Filters. And then I'm going to go to Filter, Sharpen, unsharp mask. No, crazy settings there. Let's just bring this down a little bit. Generally, what you want to do is start off with a radius. Depending on the resolution of your image, usually 1 is fine on the radius. And then you adjust the amount accordingly until it looks a little sharper. Keep threshold on at 0. Generally, it's not a good idea to mess around with threshold. I'm going to zoom in to 100%, Control plus until it's 100%. And I'm just going to push this until, you can also see the preview here, until I start to see halation. Now halation, if I just exaggerate this a little bit, it's where you can see a slight rim of white on the inside of a lighter color and black on the outside of a darker color. So you can see it there. Don't know if I just zoom in so you can get a good idea of what's going on there. Can you see that white edge there and then the black edge there? You don't want halation. You want it to be sharp, but you don't want it to be halated. So I'm going to bring down that halation until I get to the point where it no longer is an issue. I can even switch the preview on and off here. But the image is looking a little crisper. And I'm pretty happy with that. So, click on OK. Great. Now, the great thing about using a smart filter is that I can always switch this on and off whenever I wish. I can even double click on where it says unsharp mask here and adjust should I find that later on it's not quite right. So there we go. Brilliant. Now, so we've cropped the image. We've whacked out any colors, any hues that are in the image by converting it, well, by knocking out the saturation. We've also added a smart filter, in this case, unsharp mask, to give it a little crispness. The next stage is, I would say at this point, perhaps ignore any adjusting of contrasts and what have you. Because the image is quite faint, this is great. It gives us a good insight to what's going on in the shadows. We're going to have a go at removing these blemishes. But again, we're going to do this non-destructively, as we did with the smart filters, by creating a blank layer and then going to, for instance, the, let's go to the clone stamp tool. And we're going to make sure that current and below, or even all layers if you wish, but current and below is fine in this particular case, is selected. In that way, if I was to do a little bit of clone work here, it's actually being applied to this layer and not to the original background layer. And as you can see, if I switch it on and off, you can see there that cloning information is disappearing and reappearing. Perhaps what I should do as well as a good practice, give this layer a name. So I'll just call this, how about photo-retouching layer. Can't think of a better way of putting it. Okay, there we go. How's that? So let's start repairing this image. So I've got my layer selected. I've got my stamp tool. I may dodge over to the heal tool occasionally, but I'm going to work with the stamp tool. I've also got a, I don't know if you can see this on here, a Wacom tablet and stylus. I'd certainly recommend, if you're going to do any photo restoration, use these tools. Don't use a mouse. You'll get nowhere very, very quickly. So they're about 50 quid. £50, what's that, $65? Not a lot of money to spend. Okay, so I'm zooming in. I like to work at about 200% zoom factor. You can see down there, 200. It also says it up here, Control plus until it says 200. I'm going to look at the areas that need restoring, perhaps zoom out occasionally, Control 0 or Command 0, just to look at the image, just to make sure that I'm not cloning out something which is actually photographic. There we go. So I'm quite safe in working in those areas. So let's go. Just going to move up to this here. I'm using the space bar to move myself around. Okay, so using the stamp tool, just going to tap out some of these blemishes. And I think I'm going to have to do this in fast forward mode. So here goes until I come up with something else to say. Didn't take me long to actually interrupt the workflow here. I just want to give you a quick tip on using the clone stamp tool. Now the Alt key gives you the ability to target. So you hold down the Alt key, click, and that's now your targeted region. That's the region you're going to be copying from. So if I take my mouse over to here and start painting, you can see the target is following from that region that I clicked to wherever my mouse is going. Okay, so that's great. One thing I would certainly not do if I'm using the stamp tool is this. Target, paint, 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 paint. It's not a good idea. You end up with this repetition, which you can see here. And by the way, I need to select a line up there. You really want to ensure that you are constantly reselecting where you're taking that pixel information from. Otherwise, you'll end up with a lot of patination, a lot of repetition. So to avoid that, take from here, take from up there, take from over there, take from over here. How about a bit from there, a bit from there, a bit from there. If something goes wrong, Control Z. Don't try and undo it just by painting it out. Press Control Z to undo any errors as you go along. So your hand's got to be hovering over your keyboard at all times. Now I'm right-handed, so I use my left hand hovering over the left-handed side of my keyboard. My fingers are sort of touching the Shift and the Control and the Alt, and I'm near the space bar as well if I want to go to the Move tool. So I'm constantly tapping away on the Alt, changing the source. I don't know if you can hear this on the microphone, but it's like tap, 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 constantly refreshing the area that I'm taking this pixel information from. Okay, back to fast forward. See you in a bit. Now, one other tip I would suggest is make sure you use a brush that is the correct size for whatever you're doing. So if you are working in a very small area over here, for instance, you want to get rid of this grain, this little bit of mark here, use a very small brush. As you can see, the diameter of this brush is pretty small at the moment. I can increase the size of my brush either by right-clicking with a mouse, or I think it's that part of the pen there, if you're using a pen, and then just increasing the size here. Alternatively, my favored method is by using the parenthesis keys on the keyboard, and you can see the one on the right increases the size of the brush, the one on the left decreases the size of the brush. So for small areas, very tight areas, use a small brush. For large, wispy areas, use a larger brush. Anyway, stop interrupting me, back to it. Oh, constant interruptions. Anyway, right, what I've actually done there, you can see that I've only really tidied a very small area. If I just switch this on and off, you can see my new area. I've been on this for ages. Oh my word, I've been doing this for 25 years and I would not be doing this. I've deliberately gone in on this because I really want to show you the clone stamp tool. The way it's, it's very, very good to sort of get a good practice going with the clone stamp tool, even if it's on a really boring area like that. But in reality, if this was my little photo that I was working on, I would probably use either the spot healing brush tool or even the healing brush tool. I'm going to start off with the spot healing brush tool now. We're going to do the same kind of work. I'm going to zoom in, and what the spot healing brush tool does is it, well, pretty much does what you'd imagine. It removes spots. So if you were to click and just paint a little area like that, you can see it removes any blemishes. Now that would have been the method that I would have chosen. It's a lot quicker. It's not very good on large areas though, so what I could do is I could swing over to the healing brush tool just by clicking down, holding down, or right clicking and selecting the healing brush tool. And if I select from up here and paint over here, it does pretty much the same thing as the stamp tool. The only difference is, let me give you an extreme example here. If I take from up here and then paint over here, is that it adapts the tone or the color from the targeted area to the area of application. So you don't have to worry about subtle changes in tone or hue. So I could very quickly tidy this area up using that particular tool. It's not a replacement to the stamp tool because the stamp tool is still very good with working in areas of detail, whereas the healing tool can be a little bit temperamental. It can bleed out sometimes. So if I give you an example, if I'm just working on the edge here, can you see the way it's kind of smudging the differences between the edges there? So yeah, it's not ideal. but it works in many cases like this on areas of very bland detail. Anyway, I'm going to get back to this if you don't mind. Okay, just spent 25 minutes on this. I usually like to be very methodical, but I'm being watched, so I feel a bit embarrassed. So as a result, I kind of was a bit all over the place with it. I usually like to start top left and then work my way down to the bottom right. In this particular case, it didn't happen. But never mind, we've got it done. I was at a 200% zoom factor, I hope, for most of it, which allows me to see a high level of detail. I'm going to zoom out now and just check to see if I've covered all the bits that need covering. You'd probably have noticed that while I was working on the image, I was cycling through different tools. The clone stamp tool, the healing tool, the spot healing tool. I even moved on to the dodge and burn at one point. So I had quite a collection of different tools on the go. I wasn't just sticking to one technique. As the occasion arrives, I come across a certain scenario, then I change the tool accordingly. It's like anything you do in life. If you're doing gardening, is it going to be a fork? Is it going to be a spade? Is it going to be a hoe? Yeah. Anyway, I've left some weird stuff till last, I have to say. I've got this outer edge here. Using the stamp tool, I'm going to very quickly, with a large brush, build up that area there. Because I'm using a large brush, you can't really see the join point. I'll do the same over here also, constantly changing where I'm getting this information from. There's a bit of repetition there, I don't want that. There we go, that's looking a bit better. And the same over here. Yeah, I think that's probably too dark anyway, so I'm just going to grab from that corner. Ooh, how am I going to do this? Okay, let's just grab from over there. And maybe something like that. And over to here. That's starting to look pretty decent. And finishing the sky. There we go. Right, now, contrast. Now that I've got rid of anything which is non-photographic, like scratches, bits of dirt, pen marks, whatever, in the image, if I now perform levels on this image, I'm going to get something fairly accurate. Whereas before, it would be picking up on missing parts of the image and ink and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my adjustment layers. I'm going to do it non-destructively as per usual. I'm going to click on levels and dead easy. We're dealing with the black and white, aren't we? Even though it is an RGB and I'm working on the composite here as opposed to the channels, because there's no color information in there, I can safely bring in the black point, holding down the Alt key or the Option key if you're using a Mac, until I can see small grains, not clumps, but grains. And then the same with the white. Yeah, about there. There we have it. That's looking okay. Should have seen the image to begin with. It was actually all right. Okay, so yeah, we've taken it a reasonable distance. Now, sometimes you get areas where it's still too light. You can't quite get like maybe the streaks and things like that. Especially in skies, you quite often see streaks, and they can be a nightmare to get rid of. So I'm going to show you a method for tapping these little streaky areas out. I'm just going to add a levels adjustment layer just on top here. And I'm going to slightly bring this over here to the right just to darken. I think I'll close that down, and I'm going to invert my mask, Control-I or Command-I, so that it now disappears. And then with my brush tool, I'm going to use white as my color. And I'm going to go to the areas where the problems are. I'm going to bring my brush down so it sort of fits within that area. I'm going to bring the opacity of the brush down as well, say 20%, or maybe even 10%. You can use numerical keys just to get those figures. I'm just going to tap away at that streak until it starts to disappear. If I just do it before and after, you can see I've done something to it at least. Okay, I could also flip my colours from black to white, press the X key, and just make sure there's nothing sort of overhanging there. Okay, flipping them back over again, there's another bit over here. Maybe I'll increase the opacity of this a little. And if you really want to see the streaks, if you want them to jump out at you, the best way of doing that is to hold down the space bar and shake your image a little bit. And they just become more obvious. The eye doesn't have time to get used to that subtle difference in tone. Make the brush a bit bigger. I think this needs to be darkened very slightly. Beauty of using an adjustment layer for this is that you can switch between the black and the white. The black will undo, the white will redo that adjustment. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. I can just go over this. And of course, I could do this the other way around as well. I could produce another adjustment layer with lighter levels. And then I could go over areas which were too dark. In fact, I may as well just do that now. Why not? Rather than talking about it. Levels, slightly lighten. And then if I just get rid of that, inverse, Control-I, and then look for areas that I feel are too dark. And again, with white, just sort of paint them out like that. And if it goes wrong, you can always flip your colours. I like to press X and tap it back in again. Go back to my dark here. There we have it. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's see what it looked like before and after. In fact, I'm going to grab all of these layers, all of the layers that I've done stuff with, and I'm going to drop them into a layer group over here. So I can call this one Retouch. Easier to manage then. I can just switch that on and off as a group, and you can see the before and the after. And I've just seen a bit more up there, which I just want to do before we move on. There we go. I'm happy with that now. Right. Okay, that's the first stage done. Now we need to move on to a rather tricky stage, which is the hand tinting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse that and I'm going to start introducing colors to this RGB image. You're not going to be able to do this with a grayscale. You will need to go to Image, Mode, and convert to RGB if your image is a grayscale. So, how do I hand tint the image? There are several ways of doing this, but the method that I prefer, again, non-destructive, is to create a layer group. I'm going to call this one Hand Tint. Now, within that layer group, I'm just going to bring in Adjustment Layer, Color Balance. And maybe I'll start with the background. So what I'll do is I'm going to mix in a green. You don't want to be too over the top with this, so something like that. We can always go back to this afterwards. It is an adjustment layer after all. And then I'm going to invert my mask. Can you guess what I'm going to do next? Using my brush tool with white, going to put it on 100% opacity. I'm just going to paint. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? Do you know that's a mark behind her head, isn't it? I thought it was part of the image. Okay, it's all non-destructive, so it doesn't really matter, does it? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to this, and I'm going to get rid of that. Oh my word. I thought it was something going on there, but it's not. Just a a blemish, I think. So, okay, let's get rid of that. Ugh. Amateur. 25 years, still an amateur. That'll do. Right, okay, moving back to my colour balance. In fact, I'm going to give this a name. Call this one greens, why not? Just so I know where I am. Get my paintbrush tool. This one here. Clicking on the actual mask thumbnail itself, that's very important. Start painting again. All the same rules apply. That's a mess as well, isn't it? Oh, do you know? Really not doing very well today, am I? Complete amateur. Right, okay, just, there we go. Do it quickly. Right, back to the greens. It's because you're watching me, you're ruining it. Right. Okay. You flaming galahs. Shall I fast forward this bit? Yeah. Oh, that'll do. Right, okay, I can always come back to that. Again, it's non-destructive, so it's very easy to jump back to that layer and add more if I need to. Next is going to be, how about we go for, I'm just making these up as I go along, how about browns? So again, new adjustment layer, might call this one browns. And then I'm just going to mix a bit of brown together. It's kind of like a sepia brown, I think. Again, not overdoing it. What do you reckon she's got a brown coat or a blue coat? I'm going to make a red coat or something crazy like that. Anyway, let's go with that for now. Again, Control-I to inverse. Select your mask first. Control-I to inverse. Get your paintbrush with white as your colour. Increase the size of your brush. Paint it in. We can always adjust this afterwards if it's not right. Not convinced it is. It kind of looks a bit artificial at the moment, doesn't it? Maybe add a bit over here as well. A bit of random bit on the roof there. Maybe a bit over here as well. Yeah, I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to give it a tweak because that's not right. I'm going to double click on that. About a little less yellow, or even yellow. A little less red. There we go. Be a bit more subtle with it. Right. Oh, blue sky. Blues. Let's go for the blues next. So this one here. Colour balance. Here we go. Mix the nice sky blue in. Something like that. Blue. Or blues. Oh, inconsistent. There you go. Blues. Right. Again, clicking on the thumbnail. The mask nail. Mask nail? Whatever. Control-I to invert it. Get your brush out, white, paint. Bit for the water as well, I think. Oh, very nice, yes. Flip the colours, just going to blend a bit of that out with a larger brush. Okay, I don't know what to do with all that. There's a lot going on there, isn't there? I think what I'm going to do now is, how about I go for skin tones? Okay, so again, add an adjustment layer for the skin tones. It's kind of a browny colour. Something like that, maybe. Yeah, that'll do. Skins. Here we are, and again, select the mask, Control-I or Command-I if you're using a Mac. Wish you wouldn't use Macs, it'd be so much easier for me to give you that instruction. And again, flip over to white and paint in the skin regions. See, I'm not being very precise with this, it's all a bit soft and mushy, and I can always flip my colours if I go over the edges a little. Whoops. Sorry, madam. Again, with a hand here, maybe a slightly smaller brush because it is a bit of a tighter area. Don't be afraid about going over the edge like that, because you can always flip your colours with the X, paint it out again. Okay, nearly done, nearly done. There we are, that's looking pretty good. And she's got a hand, there's her fingers. Ah, there we are. Legs. Excuse me, madam. Can you see it looks very artificial in the shadows at the moment? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call back colour balance. And maybe what I'll do, can you see here you can select between different tones. So you've got shadows, midtones and highlights. If I go into the shadows and kind of do the reverse of what I did with the skin tones, just a little bit, just not much, something like that. And then go into the highlights and then just bring a bit of gold into it like that. Yeah. So the shadows aren't bright pink or anything like that. That looks pretty decent. Okay. A little bit more up here, I think. Where's my brush? Make sure I go back to the mask thumb there. White, paint, that's it. Hair. Let's move on to hair. What colour hair do you think she is? I think she's a brunette. So again, I'm going to go for something similar to the browns with the skins, but actually, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to show you something else. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to go a bit crazy with it, because with the skin, I'm going to paint it all in like this. It looks completely artificial, but don't worry. Don't you worry one little bit. Don't worry your pretty little head about it, because there we go. Painted that in like that. Let's do a neck. Perfect. I'm going to add another adjustment layer, but this time it's going to be a hue and saturation. And I'm going to bring the saturation down like that. And again, Control-I to flip. And then I'm just going to paint white over a hair. So I've got control over the saturation of that brush. Not bad. Do the same with her eyebrows. Maybe even the whites of the eyes, if you can see them, and the teeth as well, very important. Teeth are not white. They're kind of similar colour to the skin, just paler, that's all. So usually it's just a question of knocking a bit of saturation out for the teeth. And the eye whites as well. In fact, the eyes themselves, blue eyes are actually brown, but just less brown than brown eyes. If you don't believe me, then sometime, convert an image from colour to black and white of yourself if you have blue eyes. Colour your face brown, then just knock the saturation down a bit. It's amazing. Anyway, what about pink for gums? Am I going to have to create an adjustment layer specifically for gums? Gums and lipstick. Okay, we could call it gums and lipstick. So, colour balance. Gums and lipstick. Reckon about there, sort of purpley colour. Flip. And paint. Where shall I go? I won't do her eyes, that'll just look wrong. Okay. Little bit of lippy, madam. Little bit of gummy, madam. There we go. Perfect. There she is with a handbag. A handbag. Right. Okay then. So that's... yeah, it's all right. Tell you one other thing I'm going to do. This area here doesn't look right, does it? Low opacity brush, 20%. I'm going to paint a bit of gum in her eyes. Just a little tap. Don't want to put too much in. Don't want to make her look like, I don't know, she's distraught or something. A little bit under here as well. Maybe around the nose. Tiny blush of it around the cheeks. Same with you, madam. Ooh! Widow Twanky. Right, okay, a little bit under there. It's the trouble when you've got an image which is so degraded, it's very difficult to see where to start and where not to. Okay, right, let's move away from that. Let me get rid of these palettes. You don't need these, do you? What we got these out for? Okay, just get rid of them. Right, okay, moving on, going back to colour balance. I'm going to go for yellow this time. Yeah, I'm going to add a whole heap of yellow to this lady's hat. So again, inverse. I really need to put that somewhere. How about I put it down there? There we go. Inverse and paint on full opacity. Nice yellow hat for her. Where did she get that hat? Ugh. Right, okay, you know, I think I'm going to go back to the hue and saturation. I haven't been labelling these. Lazy. Lazy, good for nothing. Oh, now I've gone and done that one as well. Okay, there we go. I'll just knock a bit of that out there. All right. Here we go. Which one's this? That one is, I'll call this one Lippy. Always good to label. Always good to label. Yellows. How about I give this woman matching socks? Why not? So yellow, white, brush. Let's go for it. Oh, look at those. Lemony lemon socks. Ooh. Right, okay, so shall I give her a bit of lemon sock as well? Why not? Yeah. Amidst her plumsters. So there we go. Let's put those in there like that. Oh yeah, pink shoes. She's got a lippy pink. Let's do it. Lippy pink shoes. I'm never going to wear them. Never going to wear them. Not me. Don't care if my wife says that pink looks nice. Not doing it. Right. Do you know I might put a bit of sky blue on her glossy black shoes? Just a little bit. Just because it's kind of reflective. It's not really sky blue, is it? It's kind of more like a purpley blue. I might even go back to that and give it a tap. Where is it? Oh, it's down there. Right. Yeah, that's a different blue, isn't it? Oh. There. Is that sky blue enough for you? Right, anyway. Get out of it. Right, let's go back onto that. Do you know, if anything pops up and annoys you, just press escape. It gets you out of most issues in Photoshop. Oh, she's got other garments on. Right, okay, so going through these ones now, I think I'm going to have to do a bit of fast forwarding on this. So again, following the same procedure, create a colour balance. It has to be, of course, an adjustment layer. Use your paintbrush and paint it in or paint it out. Depends if you go wrong or not. See you on the other side. Right, as you can see, I've done all the major blocks of colour, but it looks extremely unrealistic. So, what to do in such a scenario? Well, I personally would tackle the issue like this. I'd create another layer group, and I'd call this one, how about hand-tint, I can't even see what I'm writing there. Adjustments. What? Yeah, that's right. Okay, we'll go with that, I think. And within that group, I would create 3 color balances. The first one I would call red. As you can see, I've mixed a very strong red for that color balance. The second even, I would call, how about green? Here we go, you can probably see where I'm going with this. And the third, definitely the third this time, I would call blue, and you can guess what mix is going to be in there. Now, okay, that doesn't really add anything, does it? Don't worry. So what we're going to do is we're going to inverse each one of these, effectively turning all of the adjustment invisible. And then I'm going to have to be pretty careful here. I'm going to think about what colours I could throw into various other areas like the greens to produce more of a natural sort of shrubby look. Shrubbery. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the red, I'm going to choose my brush and white as my colour, and I'm going to bring the opacity of that paint down to next to naught. So I've got it on 0 there, and I'm just going to throw a few little bits in there. In fact, I might even go to 0.5, which is 5%, just for a really subtle change. I'm not even guaranteeing this is going to work. Just giving it a go. Okay, so there we go. We've added a bit of red, which has kind of thrown a few shades of brown in there. And maybe I could do the same here. If you look at any plant life, I'm very much into my gardening. If you look at any plant life, you'll see that each plant has its own shade of green. You don't get one big group of plants all the same colour. There will be different shades. So do consider that when you're working with shrubbery. Maybe I'll add a bit of blue in here. There we go, see? Already that's starting to look a little interesting. Maybe even a bit of green. Yeah, believe it or not, green things sometimes have a bit of green in them as well. And I could do it up here as well. A bit of blue up here as well. Just adds a bit of variance. I'll throw a bit over there as well. And I've actually thrown loads in the back there just to fill that gap. I think I'll have a look at some of these areas here. Maybe add a little bit of blue. Whoops. Hang on a second. Back to 5%. Just add a little bit of blue in there. That's coming out a little purple. So maybe even just a bit of green as well, just to counterbalance it. That's a little bit of realism. That's not bad. Do you know, I don't think I've ever coloured that in, have I? Or her bag. I'll do it now with a bit of red. Just a little bit. And the same with the camera. The old box camera. Maybe a little bit of green there just to reflect whatever's going on the ground. A little bit of blue at the top to reflect a bit of the sky. Maybe a bit more green there. Same with her bag. And the coat is a complete disaster. But, you know, I'm going to add another adjustment layer to this. I know I've already got one elsewhere, but just to keep it simple, I'm going to add another hue and saturation. And with this one, again, whack out the saturation, select the mask, invert, and then using the brush tool with a low opacity, I can now start pushing some of the saturation out where I don't want it to be. So I'm going to put that on 10%, and maybe just in all the creases. I could have gone through the highlights and the lowlights, as it were, with the colour balance, but I just couldn't be bothered. So here we are. Add a bit of variance. See, already just throwing those little variances in, starting to make it look a little more like a real red coat. Maybe even just for good measure, just throw a few little dabs of green. I don't know why, because I'm like that. And a little bit of blue. With a little bit of blue. Here we are. Don't want to overdo it. Yeah, maybe. Same with the skin, actually. We've got to be careful, though. We don't want to make it look cold. A bit of red there, maybe. Yeah, maybe. Now, this isn't the best photo in the world for hand colouring. Some images work better than others. Images which have very, very subtle shades of grey can look amazing. This image is kind of like a photocopy. It's almost from black to white with not much in between. And as a result, it's not as convincing as others. But I think perhaps you've got the idea of what's going on here. You know, you can see how to process your images to get from a fairly rough black and white image to a fairly realistic, partially realistic hand-tinted image. I'm going to carry on with this. I'm going to go fast forward again, and I will see if I can make some big improvements. So bear with me. Right, I think that will do. It's not perfect. As I say, it's not the ideal image for hand tinting. But what I will do now is I'm just going to whack over a general color balance over the top, just to kind of bring in some warmer tones, I think. I think it just needs a bit of livening up. I think also what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in a levels, and I'm just going to darken it slightly. And you know, I think I need to add a hue and saturation, just bring down the saturation a fair bit, just to give it that look. Okay, that's going to have to do. I'm getting tired. I want to go have something to eat. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed today's tutorial. If you have, don't forget to hit the like. Please do subscribe. Add comments. I'd love to meet you and have a chat with you and have a bit of discussion about Photoshop. And also hit the bell, the notification bell, if you're subscribed, so that you can see new videos as they occur. So thank you for joining me, and I'll see you on the next one. Billet lady inside.